Lonely rancher discovers an amazing request from his unexpected pen pal. That changes everything. Hank wiped the sweat from his brow, the Texas sun beating down mercilessly as he surveyed the parched earth of his family's ranch. He could almost hear his father's voice echoing in the wind, the weight of expectation mixing with the smell of sun-dried grass. Maintaining the land had been his life's work, but the struggle had turned into an uphill battle he wasn't sure he could win anymore. Bills piled up like tumbleweeds, and the cattle grew leaner by the season. As he trudged to the mailbox, fatigue clung to him like a shadow, and his heart sank, bracing for yet another month of disappointment. Then he saw it. A neatly handwritten envelope nestled amongst the usual bills and junk. It was postmarked from a college town he didn't recognize, but the name scrawled across the front stirred something within him. Clara. He hesitated, a frown etching deeper into his features. What could a professor possibly want from him? Curiosity flickered to life as he ripped open the envelope, scanning her words thick with ambition and hope. She was searching for a retreat location for her research on sustainable farming, a concept Hank had never considered. Yet somehow, in Clara's words, he felt the weight of his dreams stirring, bringing them back to life with every line. Each letter exchanged over the coming weeks pulled him deeper into an emotional quagmire. Clara's life was filled with passion for new ideas that illuminated paths Hank hadn't dared to tread for years. The contrast was stark. In his rugged, tradition-bound life, where each sunrise meant another day of hard labor and quiet solitude, Clara danced through the world, battling systemic hurdles for progress. Her spirited dreams illuminated forgotten corners of his own heart, and he felt the tightening grip of isolation loosening ever so slightly. Still, the burden of his family's legacy was a ghostly specter that loomed large, a reminder of expectations tucked away in the nooks of his mind. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just as he began to contemplate the refreshing possibilities Clara represented, her latest letter brought an unsettling revelation. She had uncovered a family secret tied to his ranch, an injustice that loomed heavy like a storm on the horizon. The words clawed at him, forcing him to confront the loyalty he felt toward his family's name juxtaposed against a truth that might unearth the roots of past wrongs. Doubt coursed through his veins like ice water. What did it mean to uphold a legacy born from unfairness? He felt the walls closing in, escalating the tension that twined itself around his heart like a noose. As he stared into the fading light of the Texas evening, the horizon morphing into a wilderness of uncertainty, the storm rumbled ominously above. It seemed to reflect his inner turmoil. He was left grappling with the question that burned in his gut. Could he truly forsake the traditions that defined him for the sake of justice? Amidst the furious winds, Hank felt the residue of his father's legacy claw at him, forcing him to choose between stagnation and progress. As the last gust of light faded and darkness enveloped the land, he clutched Clara's letter to his chest, breathless with anticipation and fear. The decision beckoned to him, a crossroads he never wanted to face, yet here it was, raw, relentless, and demanding he step forward into the unknown. Hank took a deep breath, the salty tang of the approaching storm filling his lungs as the winds whipped through the now familiar barren plains. The world seemed to pulse with energy that day, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing in his heart. The letter detailing Clara's findings was heavy in his hands, words woven with convictions that both terrified and excited him. The weight of his family's secrets felt more like a shackle than a heritage, as he prepared for the inevitable confrontation looming ahead. Unsure how to reconcile the truth Clara had unveiled alongside the loyalty he felt to his father and their shared history, Hank paced. A kaleidoscope of memories stitched themselves together. His father teaching him the intricacies of cattle herding, the importance of their family's reputation, and all the lessons expertly mingled with values that felt increasingly suffocating. What kind of man would he be if he betrayed that legacy? The idea throbbed in his mind, rousing an urgency that pushed him forward. Taking a seat on his creaking porch, Hank gazed out at the vast expanse, as if nature could provide him with a semblance of guidance. Clara's voice echoed in his head, filled with the promise of sustainable farming, ways to regenerate the land that had been in his family for generations. He envisioned her excitement both vividly and achingly, the way she breathed life into barren soil by imagining the possibilities. Emphasis on possibilities. The very thought made his heart race, but also ignited a fear he hadn't anticipated. Could he be bold enough to explore those possibilities, especially when they contradicted everything he had ever known? A sleepless night passed, and by morning Hank knew change could not come fast enough. He took out pen and paper, a fierce determination surging within him as he began to draft a letter to Clara. It was neither easy nor simple. The words formed and reformed, an internal battle raging against his own doubts. He poured his fears onto the page, fear of what others might think, fear of relinquishing the past, fear of ultimately failing in a new endeavor. But somewhere in that torrent of uncertainty, a glimmer of hope sparked. It swirled in the ink and on the page. The door creaked closed behind him as he stepped into his truck, the familiar leather seat embracing him like an old friend. Driving towards town, he felt the pulse of change thrumming through the air, electric and chaotic. Each mile pulled him out of the confines of the life he knew. Each bump in the dirt road resonated with the rhythm of his own heartbeat. Clara was a stranger, yet she had become an anchor amid the tumult, her hopes and dreams beckoning him toward a future that felt rejuvenating. He had pored over her suggestions of the retreat, what it might mean for both of them, and how it could breathe new life into a land that had grown stagnant under his watch. Opening the door to this new reality also begged him to reflect upon the roots of who he was. He stepped into the post office, the cool air a sharp contrast to the hot winds outside. He handed his letter to the clerk, newfound courage mixing with underlying insecurity. The weight of his decision flicked the last page on the book of his past. This was the point of no return. Today, he was more than just a rancher. He was a man confronting the shadows of lineage for the sake of a choice that could redefine his future. Was he ready to stand up against the tether of his ancestry? He snapped his seatbelt on, exhaling courage, the winds whispering secrets of the unknown ahead as he drove away from tradition and closer to potential. What he didn't yet realize was that this was only the beginning. The call for justice and change was growing louder, and so were the storm clouds over the horizon, promising an inevitable confrontation with those who would fight to uphold the very injustices he sought to confront. The sun had clawed its way above the horizon, throwing vibrant rays across the pasture, illuminating each blade of grass with hopeful brilliance. Yet Hank felt none of that warmth. The landscape, while stunning, felt foreign as he sat at the kitchen table, the remnants of breakfast untouched before him. Clara's letter had invigorated something dormant inside him. Courage, perhaps, but it also stoked the fires of doubt. He picked up his phone, the weight of it anchoring him momentarily. The digital screen glowed, filled with contacts that represented a life that was slowly slipping away from him. He hesitated, staring at Clara's name, like a line thrown into turbulent waters. She had dared him to dream and rethink everything he believed about their land, their way of life. But could he truly bridge the distance between the past and this uncertain future? Drumming his fingers on the table, he allowed himself to recall moments of his childhood, the laughter echoing through the fields, the sun-warmed feeling of success from a well-managed herd. Those memories that once inspired pride now felt like chains. As the thrill of change wrestled with fear in his chest, he understood the profundity of that inner conflict. At what cost would he pursue these new ideas? But the gravity of the situation was undeniable. If he remained passive, he risked not only Clara's aspirations, but his own future as well. Would he remain a mere custodian of the past or step forward to become a steward of future possibilities? Resolutely, Hank stood, his chair scraping against the floor. Desperate for clarity, he threw open the front door and stepped outside. The brisk air enveloped him, as raw as the emotions warping his mind. He moved toward the barn, a place that had sheltered him from storms past, both literal and metaphorical. Inside, the scent of fresh hay and wood crackled with familiarity. This was a sanctuary, but today it felt more like a pit of memories clawing to trap him. Taking a deep breath, he surveyed the expanse of the barn. His father's work-worn tools hung neatly on the walls, artifacts of a life Hank had inherited but not fully embraced. Each item served a purpose, a lesson imparted, yet each one echoed the stubbornness of tradition that had stifled his vision. In their presence, he clashed with his father's ghost, a figure of authority who had prized strength over vulnerability, conformity over innovation. Hank's pulse quickened as a plan began to crystallize. He felt drawn to the tools, imagining how he could utilize them differently, merging old methods with Clara's sustainable principles. The rebellion within him burgeoned. Could he find a way to honor his father's legacy while pushing the boundaries of its confines? Determined, he set to work. He gathered a few tools and sketches Clara had sent, merging them with his ideas to explore regenerative practices. The clash of metal on wood sounded like a heartbeat of purpose, each swing a decision forged from newfound conviction. As he settled into this flow, his mind wandered to the obstacles ahead. What would his neighbors think? Would his father's friends feel betrayed if he pursued this path? Energy surged through him. With each moment dedicated to bridging innovation with heritage, he found scraps of his own identity weaving into that legacy. He was a rancher, yes, but also an innovator in a cradle of traditions stretching back generations, each new choice crafting his essence. Hours later, as dusk painted the sky, Hank stepped outside, wiping sweat from his brow. The tension that had knotted his stomach began to loosen, yet a lingering fear nagged at him, whispering doubts about the confrontations that awaited him. Tomorrow would be decisive. He would have to face those who viewed change as a threat. Perhaps he would even need to confront his father's friends, who valued the past more than any potential future. Hank felt the gravity of that reality settle heavy on his shoulders, but this was no time for retreat. The time had come to face the storm, not just the one brewing in the distance, but the tempest within himself. With Clara's voice resonating in his heart, he took one last glance at the horizon. As darkness began to descend, he grasped the fervent hope that echoed within him. Change was unavoidable now, and he was ready to meet it head-on. And so Hank prepared to step into a confrontation that could reshape not only his life, but the legacy carved by generations before him. Could he reconcile the past with a vision for a more sustainable future, or would the tides of tradition drag him back? The clarity of choice loomed ahead, beckoning curiosity and trepidation in equal measure. The morning light streamed through the barn's creaking doors, as Hank was jolted awake by the resolve echoing in his mind. He had spent the night dissecting Clara's words, twisting them into visions that played out like a film reel in the dimness of his room. Today's confrontation would demand every ounce of courage he could muster, and he was determined to face it fully awake and ready. After quickly washing up, he felt the familiar weight of his father's boots stare back at him from the front porch. They were inconspicuous relics now, part of a life that was at odds with his emerging identity. In an impulsive act, he set them aside, opting for a pair of worn sneakers instead. They felt light, and with each step toward the barn, he imagined shedding old expectations as he pressed into his new path. As he strolled outside, brisk air filled his lungs and slowly electrified his senses. Today wasn't just about changing the ranch, it was about changing himself. He had spent enough time feeling like a spectator in his own life. It dawned on him that he could no longer tiptoe around confrontation. He needed to charge into the room, voice steady and unyielding, unfurling his vision with the conviction of someone who finally believes in their purpose. The sun climbed higher, and with it, Hank began the day's tasks. He worked in silence at first, pushing the wheelbarrow of compost towards the gardens he envisioned altering, integrating Clara's sustainable techniques with his practiced hands. Each handful of organic material he tossed felt like an offering, a commitment to transforming his vision into reality. This was no longer just theoretical. He would start with the soil, nurturing it to make room for growth, just as he sought to cultivate the future of the ranch. Midway through, Hank felt compelled to pause and revisit the sketches Clara had sent. At first they seemed foreign, symbols of a world that revolved around concepts he had never considered exploring. Yet now they sparked something fiery within him, an emboldened vision of merging their past with a renewable future. He grabbed a pencil and began scribbling his adaptations, crafting a plan that felt authentic yet revolutionary. His heart raced as he considered the knowledge he was learning. Innovation was daunting but exhilarating. But what of the status quo? What of the men who might not think highly of change? Each hesitant thought of the possible pushback turned into a looming specter, hovering over his newfound determination. Would they shake their heads, dismiss him as a rogue? Would they challenge his initiatives? A surge of doubt wrestled with his growing ambition. But the notion that that fear could hold him captive was unacceptable. He could not build a better tomorrow while shackled to outdated paradigms. Today's decisions wouldn't solely redefine his work. They had the potential to redefine who he was. Just as resolve began to cement itself into his bones, a neighbor's truck rumbled in the distance, engine humming like a warning bell. Hank glanced toward the dust rising on the road. His heart dropped slightly, aware that it could signal the arrival of both friends and critics. With tension spiraling, he steeled his jaw and wiped his sweaty brow, preparing himself mentally for what was to come. Today wasn't merely about him, it was about confronting the future. As the truck came to a halt, Hank took a deep breath. The time had come to establish the legitimacy of his dreams in front of those who might yet decide to back him or tear his ambitions apart. He stepped forward, determined to speak his truth. But could he withstand the weight of expectations from those who relied on tradition? Or was his vision strong enough to allow him to lead others into a new era? The answers flickered on the edge of his consciousness, just out of reach, prompting him to consider, would he finish or falter in the face of uncertainty? As the truck door swung open, Hank's heart raced with unspoken fears and newfound determination. The moment of revelation was near, and he wasn't sure if he'd crumble or emerge galvanized. Either way, he knew he was about to step into a storm of his own making. Hank stood at the edge of the barnyard, the familiar contours of his landscape turning surreal under the weight of the moment. The gravel crunched as his neighbor, Greg, emerged from the cab of the truck. Greg's broad shoulders were draped in the familiar flannel, but today, they seemed to carry an unsettling mix of sympathy and skepticism. Hank felt a tightening in his chest. This man had always represented the old ways, the steadfast traditions that Hank now sought to challenge. "Hey, Hank," Greg called out, his tone a blend of curiosity and caution. "What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just thinking," Hank replied, his voice steadier than he felt. He took a step forward, shaking off the tension that clung to him like a heavy mist. "I've got some ideas about how to make the ranch more sustainable, maybe even a little innovative." Greg's brow furrowed slightly. "Sustainable? What are you talking about?" With Clara's sketches still fresh in his mind, Hank felt a spark of confidence bolstered by his clarity of intention. "I want to integrate some regenerative practices, make this place resilient for the future," he said, gesturing toward the soil he'd been working with earlier. "What do you mean by regenerative?" Greg crossed his arms, his skepticism acting as a barrier to Hank's ambitions. Hank hesitated, glancing down at the clods of earth he had cultivated. "We can nurture the land without depleting it. Crop rotation, cover crops, minimizing chemical use. It's about working with nature instead of against it." Each word tasted foreign yet exhilarating. Greg chuckled lightly, shaking his head. "Boy, you sound like a city slicker reading a magazine. You realize this isn't just about ideas, right? This is hard work." "Maybe I'm ready for hard work," Hank shot back, impatience bubbling under the surface. The conversation hung in the air, thick with challenge. Greg opened his mouth, uncertain of how to proceed, but his words fell away as Hank pushed past the initial shock of resistance and began to explain, laying bare the details of his vision. With every phrase, Hank's conviction turned to steel. This was more than just about the ranch. It was a testament to who he wanted to become. Gradually, Greg uncrossed his arms, interest dawning on his face. "So, you're serious about this," he said, his tone transforming from doubt to cautious intrigue. "How do you plan to get others on board?" It was a question that twisted a knot in Hank's stomach. In that moment, he felt the weakness of uncertainty creeping back in. Did he even know how to convince the others? Perhaps they would rally behind innovation, but what if they dismissed him as naive? "I don't know yet," Hank admitted, his voice softening. "But I want to try. I have to try." Greg studied him, and after a moment, he nodded slowly. "You got guts, I'll give you that. Just remember, this ranch has history, and the folks around here won't forget it easily. Don't underestimate their loyalty to the old ways." Hank swallowed hard. He couldn't let the fear of failure feed his resolve. He needed to rally support. That thought ignited a new fire within. "I'll figure it out, Greg. I have to." As Hank and Greg began to discuss practical steps, forms of outreach, and ways to open dialogues with their neighbors, Hank felt the landscape shift inside him. Action surged, propelled by burgeoning determination and hope. But a nagging sense of gloom lingered. What if he couldn't change their minds? What if he could not lead? The conversation drew to a close, and Greg slid into his truck with a friendly wave. Hank's heart raced, each beat capturing the gravity of what lay ahead. The day felt infinitely longer, each hour heavy with the weight of his choices. He turned to face the ranch, standing alone under an expanse of sky that felt both liberating and daunting. He realized that the confrontation had only begun. He was not just battling the opinions of others, but his own unfurling self-doubt. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Hank felt the urgency of his next steps pressing against him. The seed had been planted, but would it take root in this stubborn soil? He had people to convince, battles to fight, and countless uncertainties to navigate. The storm that loomed ahead was his to endure, and he could either become parched in the dry winds of rejection or flourish in the rains of change. A riddle in his mind took shape, as twists of fate whispered to him. What could a simple rancher like himself really accomplish? The answer lingered tantalizingly close, poised just beyond his grasp, a tantalizing question that urged him onward. Hank stood in the fading light of the ranch, watching the shadows inch across the fields. The conversations he had shared with Greg echoed in his mind, each failure and success carving a path into his consciousness. Today, uncertainty felt heavier than ever. The dream of transforming the ranch into a sustainable haven now dipped into a darker pool of self-doubt. He reminded himself that every journey began with a single step. "Innovation needs education," he muttered to himself, pacing the gravel driveway, the crunch of the stones grounding him amidst the whirlwind of his thoughts. How could he galvanize others? What if his ideas fell flat? These questions thrummed like a dissonant chord, disrupting his rallying spirit. Inside the barn, Clara had left her sketches scattered on the hay-strewn workbench. He picked one up, studying the vibrant green landscapes she had imagined, the symbiotic relationships between crops and animals, the methods to enrich the soil naturally. One drawing stood out: intercropping, a strategy that could turn his dreams into reality. If he could demonstrate success on a smaller scale, maybe he could sway his neighbors. Motivated by newfound purpose, he dug out his phone, hesitating only for a moment before calling Clara. The line rang, and when her voice came through, it was a touchstone for his wavering resolve. "Hey, Clara, I've been thinking about your sketches. Maybe we could try a small trial on the North Field," he proposed, excitement bubbling despite his reservations. "Absolutely. We could document the process, show them how it revitalizes the land," she replied, her enthusiasm infectious. With each exchange, Hank's confidence began to solidify. Clara was not just an ally, but a mentor in her own right, nudging him toward action. Grains of doubt still lingered, gnawing quietly in the back of his mind, but each word from her reinforced the seeds of belief he sought to cultivate. "Can you come over tomorrow? We can draft a plan and figures to show the others," he suggested, pen tapping against the table in unconscious rhythm as he scribbled notes. Just before hanging up, Clara's voice turned serious. "Hank, make sure to address their concerns. They've been doing things this way for generations. Challenge them gently. Challenge. He understood, but with a twist of anxiety, he thought of the emotional minefield that lay ahead. Those concerns weren't just the old ways. They were identities wrapped tightly in tradition, woven with blood, sweat, and years of experience. As he walked back outside, he gazed at the vast land that had shaped him. Each line of the horizon told a story of struggle and resilience, but Hank realized he needed to change the narrative without erasing their history. The next few hours blurred through action and planning, the familiar rhythm of the ranch pulsing beneath him. With meticulous care, he drafted communication for their new approaches, information sheets, and a calming message assuring everyone of the ranch's foundation. If he could present this as a collaborative effort rather than a takeover, perhaps he could ease their trepidation. Stepping back, Hank gazed at the night sky swaddled in stars, his heart racing with a cautious optimism. The outline of the barn stirred something within him. The past still stood strong, but he could bring it along into a new auspice. The loneliness he had felt just days ago was beginning to dissipate, transformed into a profound sense of connection to those around him. Yet as he prepared for the next day's outreach, a creeping tension settled in his gut. What if his standing wasn't enough? What if they dismissed his words as mere ramblings of a dreamer? This was just another hill to climb, a new challenge on his journey toward transformation, and he felt its weight as he turned to the slate of stars above, pondering the order of fate. Could his notions withstand the test of tradition, or would they fade into the shadows of old beliefs? The questions hung heavily against the backdrop of a sprawling night, setting the stage for tomorrow's confrontation with his neighbors and with himself. The dawn broke like an unsteady heartbeat, light spilling across the ranch in hesitant strokes. Hank woke early, his mind still caught between fragments of the previous night's concerns and the bright promise of innovation. As he sipped his coffee, the warmth rolled through him, clashing with remnants of uncertainty. What transpires today could redefine everything. His hands wrapped around the mug more tightly than necessary, a physical manifestation of the weight he felt resting on his shoulders. Would he really convince the others, or would he merely play the fool? The thought nagged at him, sowing seeds of anxiety, but he shook it off. Today was about action, about bridging his visions with the wisdom of tradition. Clara arrived shortly after, her brown hair a wild halo against the morning light as she entered the kitchen. "Ready to change the world?" she asked, a playful encouragement dancing in her voice. He chuckled, but the excitement felt fragile. "More like trying not to make an enemy of my neighbors." "Trust me, they're more reasonable than you think," she said, tossing a reassuring smile his way. Still, the doubt lingered. This wasn't just a presentation. It was an emotional negotiation between progress and heritage, and they were armed with layers of pride built across generations. They spread the sketches in the barn, Clara's artistry breathing life into the plans he had drafted. Each drawing exuded potential, intercropping with vibrant colors, azimuths of conservation, and diagrams that intermingled crops and livestock. The very essence of their unified concept glimmered against the rustic wood of the barn, a living representation of what they aimed to achieve. Clara caught the weariness etched in Hank's brow. "Look, it's not just about presenting facts. You know their passion for what they've built. Acknowledge it, and then show how your ideas can enhance that legacy." "Right. Got it," he murmured, adjusting the papers with a nervous flick. His willingness to honor their traditions was evident, but he feared it wouldn't amount to much against the looming wall of skepticism. With bated breath, they packed everything into Clara's truck, the road to the neighboring farms stretching ahead like a path littered with doubts. As they approached, Hank caught sight of faces familiar yet foreign, etched from years spent in routine. The sun hung heavily overhead, and the collective weight of their histories seemed to settle upon him. Shuffling into the main barn of the nearest neighbor, Hank felt the layers of apprehension thicken around him. A cluster of farmers stood, arms crossed, faces lined with fatigue and skepticism, eyes that had seen too much change already. "Thanks for coming, everyone. I have something to share," he began, his voice steadied by an intentional calm. The respect he aimed to convey was palpable, yet the fear of dismissal lurked. Would they listen, or would stubborn loyalty to tradition drown out his ambitions? As he laid out their plan, observing nods of acknowledgement intermingled with bursts of skepticism, he felt the ground shifting beneath him, his concerns metamorphosing into something more defined. The pushback was immediate, voices rising in unison against him. Old ways framing arguments laced with doubt and wariness. "Change is good, Hank, but not at the cost of what we've built," one voice shouted, and the sentiment rippled through the crowd. Hank held his breath, urging himself to maintain the fragile threads of conversation, each thread a potential link to the future he envisioned. Clara whispered beside him, her energy infusing him with resolve. "Remember what we talked about. Find common ground." "I understand the fears," he responded, raising his hand to steady their concerns. "What I propose doesn't erase our history, it enhances it." As tensions simmered and hesitations lingered in the air, Hank felt a flicker. An opportunity hung in the balance. The initial resistance signaled room for dialogue, a crucial step toward bridging the chasm between old and new. But as the conversation developed, a moment of clarity struck him. How far was he willing to challenge their preconceived notions? He knew there was no guarantee that tomorrow, or even today, would shift the tides favorably. Real progress required an even deeper risk, a willingness to face not just resistance, but also potential betrayal of their trust. His heart raced as he leaned deeper into vulnerability. What if we set a trial together? Visit, explore, and truly collaborate. Learn from each other. I promise to listen. Across the faces, expressions shifted, curiosity intertwined with skepticism, but slowly giving way to the glimmers of collective reflection. Yet lingering doubts were still entrenched in their hearts. Hank realized the battle was far from over. The moment of truth loomed ahead, fraught with the possibility of rejection or acceptance. But as he gestured towards the sketches with fervor, a strain of hope grasped at the remnants of doubt lingering in his mind. Could he pivot the long-standing traditions into a synergistic future? The question echoed, bouncing between his fragile confidence and resolute belief in progress. He knew he was standing at a precipice, and the conversation's next turn could either land them in cooperative discovery or plunge him back into the shadows of failure. As the voices melded around him, the air thick with uncertainty and possibility, Hank took a deep breath, determined to unveil whatever lay beyond the veil of hesitation. What awaited them on this path of dialogue and discovery? The answers could change everything, and he could feel the current of destiny flickering just out of reach. The tension in the barn was palpable, voices swelling and crashing like waves against a rocky shore. Hank searched for an anchor, something solid to hold on to amidst the storm of uncertainty swirling around him. His mind raced, analyzing their faces, those familiar yet guarded expressions, each one intensifying the weight of his proposal. "Together, I really believe we can innovate without losing sight of our roots," Hank urged, his voice rising above the murmurs. "Think of it as harnessing the past to empower our future rather than abandoning everything we hold dear." A tall farmer, grizzled and weathered, stepped forward, skepticism etched into every line of his face. "And what guarantees do we have that your ideas won't tear apart our way of life?" He gestured toward the drawings that Clara had so vividly created. "This might look pretty on paper, but real life doesn't always play out like that. Real life also demands adaptation," Hank countered, his pulse quickening. "The world outside is changing and we're at risk of being left behind. Together we could learn to be the front runners instead of the followers." Clara nudged him gently with her elbow, her encouragement silent but effective. A flicker of determination ignited as Hank felt her presence bolster his resolve. What if he could unravel their fear? Deep down, he recognized a shared discomfort, not just with his proposal, but with their own insecurities about the future. "Let's not deny it. There's a fine line between preservation and stagnation," he continued. "This isn't just about farming methods, it's about survival. And as a community, hasn't there always been strength in unity?" The murmurs shifted, some heads nodding in reluctant agreement, while others remained skeptical. Each response, every furrowed brow, drew Hank deeper into the mind of the people around him. Their fears were not unfounded. They were rooted in a fierce love for their land, and perhaps he could pull on that thread instead. What if we held weekly meetings? Hank proposed suddenly, the idea crashing into his thoughts like a revelation. We could create a trial community, an open space for dialogue and experimentation. You can voice your concerns, we can discuss changes, and we explore our options together. It's not my project, it's our legacy. A murmur rippled through the crowd, and for the first time he saw intrigue. Eyes widened, fists slowly unclenching. Hank sensed the shift, like a breeze stirring still water. It was a hesitant step towards possibility, but it was forward momentum nonetheless. Do you really think we can convert our farms to these new practices without losing what we cherish? A woman piped up. Her voice trembled slightly, but not from doubt. Instead, it trembled with the weight of hope resented by years of unwanted change. Yes, Hank said firmly, locking eyes with her. In fact, I believe we can enhance the very essence of what you cherish while growing in ways that will sustain and cherish our livelihoods. The frayed edges of their resolve began to weave together, forming the fabric of a tentative alliance. The idea of this trial community hung in the air like a choir waiting for a conductor. Yet, as much as he saw the flickers of enthusiasm, a pit of doubt clawed at Hank's stomach. What would happen if they agreed and hope turned into failure? Then another voice cut through the murmurs. You've given us something to think about, Hank, but we'll need time, and we will require a lot more than pretty pictures and good intentions. The acknowledgement stung, yet the farmer's words bore a tinge of respect, an opening Hank realized he must seize. That's fair, he replied, feeling a pulse of determination surge through him. This is a marathon, not a sprint. I'm willing to invest in your concerns and my commitment to this community. We must all be on board together. If this is to work, it must start and end with trust. As the murmurs subsided, Hank felt the shift within himself, like a new set of gears meshing together. The balance of hope and fear now pivoted delicately in a space of collaborative potential. He had sought to change their minds, yet the real transformation was unfolding within him. Yet the conversation hadn't concluded. It had merely opened a door. Hank's heart leapt as he considered the fragile possibilities before them. What profound conclusions awaited from these discussions? As he visualized the transformative journey ahead, one nagging fear gnawed at him. Would they truly trust him enough to join him on this unconventional venture? What was the next step in this precarious dance of uncertainty? And could the vision he cradled ignite genuine belief in those reluctant hearts? The stakes had escalated, and Hank now brimmed not just with hope, but a fierce determination to see this through, regardless of the obstacles ahead. Hank stepped out of the barn, inhaling the crisp air that held a mix of damp earth and fading sunlight. The weight of the conversations lingered around him, a mixture of acceptance and apprehension swirling just beneath the surface. Each farmer's expression was imprinted in his mind, their weathered faces like a map guiding him through this uncharted territory of collaboration and trust. What lay ahead was unknown, yet the consensus to engage in dialogue felt like a fragile filament of connection he had initiated. He glanced at Clara, who had followed him outside. Her gaze was fixed on the horizon, contemplating the transformative journey that lay ahead. You did well in there, she remarked, her voice steady, yet revealing her own underlying concerns. Did I? Hank replied, half-heartedly. Or did I merely sow the seeds of doubt amongst them? No, you sparked something, she insisted. Change always begins with a spark, even if the fire it ignites takes time to catch. But you need to be prepared for resistance. It won't happen overnight. The challenge ahead felt daunting, yet Hank's spirit kindled with a fire he hadn't fully realized he possessed. Was he the disruptor in this landscape, or was he merely attempting to steer them all away from the cliff of stagnation? Trust is key, he examined aloud, fingers unconsciously drumming against his thigh. If they can't trust me, the whole idea crumbles before it even begins. Then be transparent, Clara advised. Show them your enthusiasm isn't just idealistic. You need to put in the work, proving to them that principles can translate into practice. The thought sliced through him like a knife, revealing a dilemma he hadn't fully embraced. He had been focusing so intently on visualizing this communal journey that he had neglected the ground-level execution it would require. Would they see through his ambition and recognize the sincerity behind it? Or would they remain skeptical, blinded by years of tradition? Clara placed a firm hand on his shoulder, startling him from his spiral of doubt. Set your plans in motion, Hank. Get hands-on. Make them see you're willing to sweat in the dirt alongside them. If they see you as one of their own, they might just ride this wave with you. That evening, Hank got to work. He mapped out his first concerns and initiatives for the upcoming meetings, the potential use of cover crops, crop rotation strategies, and discussions about integrated pest management. Each decision was infused with purpose, but a new question arose. How would he instill confidence in them when the path forward was fraught with uncertainties? The following days saw Hank physically engaging with the land, pruning tree lines, surveying field rotations, digging into the soil to feel the earth beneath his fingertips. With every shovel of dirt and callus formed, he felt himself becoming closer to the community he yearned to guide. The farmers observed, some with curiosity, others still entrenched in skepticism. But Hank would not yield to doubt. This was his chance to embody the very change he wished to instigate. When the first meeting finally arrived, he stood confidently in front of a room full of familiar yet guarded faces, each creased brow a reminder of the challenge he faced. "Thank you for coming," he began, steady and resolute, despite the unease coiling in his stomach. "I want to hear from you today. I want to understand your concerns firsthand. No defenses, just honest conversation." As the responses flowed, Hank listened intently, processing their stories, fears rooted deep in history. And somewhere within, he discovered a new competence. He could not only connect, but also lead this dialogue toward tangible solutions. A woman's voice broke through his pondering. "Hank, we want to lean into this with you, but what happens if we fail?" He smiled, considering her words, the moral weight of the lives intertwined with this endeavor, and replied, "Failure isn't a stop sign. It's a lesson guide. This is our journey, and I am right here, in the field, in the meetings, every step of the way." He noticed a flicker of resolve in some of their eyes, a whisper of hope born from vulnerability. As he articulated more concrete plans, outlining testing methods and timelines, he felt a swell of camaraderie that began to knit them closer together. Yet, beneath the camaraderie lay an undercurrent of tension, an unspoken fear that still clung to the air. How far into this collaboration would they go? Would Hank's delicate fabric of hope withstand the heavy storm of their doubts? As the meeting adjourned, hope and uncertainty intertwined within him. The next steps were clearly ahead. Hank needed to ensure that trust could transform into communal action, but the weight of each farmer's expectations now rested firmly on his shoulders. What new challenge would arise when they took the plunge into the trial community? Would they truly embrace the risks of innovation, or would old habits return to choke their budding trust? As those questions echoed in his mind, Hank steeled himself for the next phase of this unfolding chapter. Ready or not, the time had come to truly face the winds of change. In the weeks that followed, Hank's resolve solidified like the barn he stood in, a symbol of what hard work and determination could yield. The sun rose earlier and set later, casting elongated shadows over fields now alive with the promise of sustainable cultivation. Each morning he welcomed the light with hope, knowing the trial community was underway. Farmers were engaging, experimenting, and most importantly, collaborating. The first project Hank had initiated, a sectional area of land devoted to cover cropping, had sprung to life much faster than he anticipated. Experimentation with legumes and grains stirred surprise among the farmers who had once regarded innovation with suspicion. As they tilled and sowed together, laughter echoed across the land, and the weight of skepticism felt lighter underfoot. One weekend, Hank organized a field day, inviting everyone to witness the early results of their efforts. Clara joined him, bringing her contagious enthusiasm and expertise to the festivities. Hank looked out across the gathered crowd, neighbors, farmers, and even families, amazed by the unity forming in the very heart of tradition. They had immersed themselves in discussions of soil health, crop diversity, and the importance of fostering a symbiotic relationship with the land. "This is incredible," Clara exclaimed, clapping as the farmers took turns sharing their own experiences with the new practices. The camaraderie was blooming in ways neither Hank nor Clara had dreamed possible. As the day drew to a close, Hank took the opportunity to step into the spotlight, standing under the golden evening light, awash in a wellspring of newfound confidence. "Thank you all for being here today. You've taken steps that demonstrate that change does not mean rejecting the past, but rather embracing the future, with the wisdom we cherish. We've proven we can innovate together." Applause erupted, but a familiar face, Gaspar, the farmer whose dissent had once rattled him, rose from the back with a bemused expression. "You're not half bad for a dreamer, Hank, but this ain't over until we see some solid results next season, all right?" Hank grinned, relishing the challenge. "I wouldn't want it any other way. We're in this together now." The exchange felt like a ritual painted with respect, a transition from adversary to ally, echoing the journey they were all on. With foundations solidified, Hank realized his path was directly tied to those who had become his communal comrades. The deep-rooted history remained intact, yet it was liberated from the confines of outdated thinking. Like seedlings bursting forth from the earth, strides toward success came with small victories, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were setbacks, drought and plant diseases that left doubt rippling through the community. Farmers wrestled with balancing tradition against innovation, their anxiety phosphorescent under pressure. The weight of expectations bore down on Hank but transformed rather than suffocated him. In these moments of struggle, he had become a conduit for encouragement, harnessing the unity born from mutual respect and shared goals. He reinforced dialogue, organizing weekly check-ins to assess progress, invite feedback, and celebrate small successes, an act that fostered trust in their collective journey. The farmers no longer viewed Hank as an outsider promising change. They saw him as a partner committed to nurturing their legacy with fresh understanding. Before each meeting, Hank took time to reflect on the stark contrasts between his life now compared to his past self. The weight of isolation had shifted into a wellspring of connection. Through the turmoil of prejudice, doubt, and tradition, he emerged not just as a rancher but as a leader, a steward of the land but also of community trust. Weeks turned into months, and seasons changed. The landscape transformed under their collaboration. As autumn approached, Hank hosted a harvest festival celebrating the fruits of their labor. They filled tables with produce and stories, weaving their paths together in a collective tapestry of hope and resilience. When Gaspar clinked his glass during the toast, silver hair glinting in the soft light, a smile broke over his weathered face. "To Hank, you brought us together, lad. This isn't a place for fear anymore. It's where we grow." Their cheers echoed like a new anthem across the fields, and Hank felt it settle deep within him, a profound sense of belonging. He raised his glass to join them, acknowledging the transformation not simply in the land, but in himself. He had traded the shadows of doubt for the strength of partnership. This new responsibility felt like a badge of honor, a testament to both enduring tradition and vibrant innovation. As the sun dipped below the horizon, illuminating the earth around them, Hank knew he had conquered the personal conflict of staying true to his roots while evolving. Embracing Clara's vision ignited his own. He had proven that resilience intertwined with innovation leads to progress, forging a path forward. Now, he stood proud at the helm of change, a testament to the enduring strength of both the earth and the bonds he had nurtured within his community. This was Hank now, confident, competent, and complete, standing tall among the legacy he had once feared to confront. Now is the time to act. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help spread these powerful narratives. Comment your thoughts and reactions about Hank's incredible journey. What stood out to you? Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let them witness the journey of overcoming and innovation. Don't wait even one more second to share. Your support matters to keep these stories alive and thriving.